Have you ever felt like life tosses you around like a leaf blown by the wind? One day you're on top of the world. The next, buried under the weight of sadness you never saw coming. But what if there was one simple truth? Just a few quiet words that could keep you grounded in your highest highs and give you hope through your darkest nights? This is the story of a king and a secret, one you can carry with you, starting today. In ancient times, there lived a king known for his wisdom and kindness. He was noble in spirit, graceful in appearance, deeply loved by his people. Even his enemies respected him. But inside, he was unsettled, like a leaf drifting on every breeze. When victories came, he let pride swell in his heart. He felt unstoppable. But the smallest sorrow, a harsh word, a heavy thought, a quiet moment of doubt, would crush him. He sank into despair, feeling weak and lost. He saw he wasn't free. His heart rose and fell with each wave of emotion. One night, standing by his window, he whispered, "How can I rule others if I can't rule myself?" The next morning, he called his 3 oldest advisors. He said, "I need something to keep me grounded, to stay humble when I'm praised and hopeful when I'm broken, something to remind me all things pass." The men said nothing, only bowed. But he knew they would return with the answer. Days passed slowly in the palace, and the king waited silently, trusting his advisors would return with something true. They were men with white hair and serene eyes, who had weathered life's storms and understood the weight of advising a heart that carried an entire kingdom within it. During this waiting period, the king observed more than he spoke. He walked alone through the gardens, without his crown, feeling the wind brush his skin, listening to water flowing in fountains and leaves rustling in the treetops. Even surrounded by beauty and wealth, he found no peace. Almost daily he wondered, how can something so small, like a feeling, dominate such a great man? He knew something inside him needed to change. And in that silence, he began to realize the problem wasn't sadness nor joy. The problem was how much he let each one control him. On the morning of the 7th day, the advisors returned. They were quiet, but there was light in their eyes. The eldest approached with slow steps. In his hands, he carried neither a sacred book nor an ancient map. He carried a ring. It was a simple ring, made of dull metal, without jewels or ornaments. But there was something about it, an invisible force, a meaning that time couldn't erase. The ring was placed in the king's hand. He looked at it. On the inside, engraved with precision and tenderness, were 3 words, "This too shall pass." The king furrowed his brow. He had expected a grand solution, perhaps an ancient spell, a powerful prayer, a magical object. But there was only this, a phrase, 3 words, a colorless ring. He almost gave it back, but something stopped him. And then he asked, "Is that all?" The advisor replied, "Your Majesty, this ring doesn't shine, doesn't weigh much, doesn't draw attention. But it carries one of the deepest secrets of human existence. When you're at the height of glory, look at it, and you'll remember that even glory passes. When you're sunk in sadness, look at it, and you'll know that even pain passes. This ring is the ground beneath your feet that you need." The king remained silent for a moment. Then he closed his hand around the ring and nodded. That night, for the first time in a long while, he slept peacefully. Gradually, the days began to change. Not because circumstances improved, but because the king now knew where to rest his thoughts. And with each victory, he looked at the ring and smiled. Not with arrogance, but with gratitude. And with each sorrow, he also looked, not with despair, but with hope. He began to walk among his people with a different posture, no longer as a king who hovered above others, but as someone who knew the value of each emotion and the impermanence of them all. Because finally he had learned, life is like the seasons. Everything comes, everything goes, and what remains is what we learn in each phase. Time passed. Not days, not months, but whole seasons. Springs filled with flowers, winters quiet and cold. The king continued his reign, but with a different spirit. People still loved him, but now there was something more. His eyes were softer, his voice gentler, and his presence, though strong, brought peace instead of fear. Then the day came that would test everything he thought he had learned. There was no warning. A sickness spread through the kingdom. Not something cursed or magical, just real, human. A strange fever swept across towns and villages, and within weeks, men, women, and children began to fall ill. The king acted fast. He opened the royal treasury, brought in healers from distant lands, and ordered care for all. But even with everything he gave, he couldn't stop the inevitable. The losses began. First, faithful servants, then close friends, and finally, his own brother, the one who had grown up with him, laughing and sword-fighting with sticks in the garden. The night he received the news, the king sat in silence. He returned to the same stone bench where, months ago, he had listened to the wind in the trees. But this time, there was no wind, no sound, just stillness. The night felt like it was holding him still in the dark. He slipped the ring off his finger, held it up to the moonlight, and read, "This too shall pass." But for the first time, those words didn't seem strong enough. He whispered, "How can this pass? How can a love so deep ever fade?" And then he cried, not like a king, but like a man. The tears came freely. He didn't hold them back. And in that darkness, something became clear, something he'd never understood until now. The ring never promised pain would disappear. It only said pain would change. That it would go from something unbearable to something you carry, a quiet scar, a memory that still aches but no longer rules you. Pain doesn't pass because it's weak. It passes because you are strong. And real strength isn't leading armies or raising swords. It's loving, even when your heart feels broken. It's walking, even when your feet are heavy as stone. It's believing that there's beauty after loss and life after silence. From that day on, the king visited the homes of those who had lost someone. He would sit with them, listen. Sometimes he said nothing at all, but always he left behind a copy of his ring. Simple, unpolished, carrying the same 4 words. And so, the king who once searched for balance became the one who taught it, not with speeches, but with presence, with compassion, with truth. Time, as always, moved forward. The trees that had once bloomed before the sickness bloomed again. Children, now older, ran through the fields once more. The kingdom rebuilt itself. Yes, it bore scars, but it also held a strength that only comes from facing pain and choosing to go on. The king had aged, yet his spirit felt younger with each passing year. His face wore soft lines, like the gentle folds of an old scroll full of stories, and his eyes now carried a glow found only in those who've known both deep joy and deep sorrow. He still wore the same ring. It was worn now. The words nearly faded, but he wore it with more pride than any golden crown. On days of celebration, when the people cheered, when wine was poured and music filled the air, he would gently touch the ring and think, "This too shall pass." The joy would pass, the applause, the excitement, and when it did, what would remain inside him? On days of mourning, of longing, of quiet, he would touch it again and whisper with a soft smile and misty eyes, "This too shall pass." The pain, the silence, the empty space, They too would move on, and when they did, he would still be here, more whole, more grounded, more human. At last, the king had learned to live with balance, not soaring too high in victory and not collapsing in defeat, just present, flowing with each season of life. He began teaching his grandchildren, his advisors, the future leaders, not with commands, but with questions. What would you do if you knew this moment will also pass? That was the seed he planted. And it was beautiful to see how, without trying, his wisdom gently touched others. One day, a young farmer received one of the simple rings the king had made. He said, "This will remind me not to give up." And the king, smiling softly, replied, "Not just to endure, but to live with an open heart, because joy and sorrow, they're both messengers, and when they pass, they always leave behind a gift." The king had come to understand something even the ancient wise men hadn't taught him, that life isn't about avoiding pain or clinging to happiness. It's about walking with awareness, about touching eternity in each passing moment, even knowing it won't last. And so, until his final day, the king lived in peace, with a steady heart, kind eyes, and the same ring on his finger. And if you're listening to this story now, if you're in a hard season, or even a good one that's made you forget, change is always near, remember this: you too can carry the ring. Even if it's invisible, even if it lives only in your heart, whatever you're facing right now, this too shall pass. Some people spend a lifetime chasing answers, in grand achievements, in riches, in complicated words, but sometimes the most powerful truth fits inside a ring, or in a single, quiet phrase. The king in this story lived a long life, but his greatest achievement wasn't his throne or his triumphs. It was learning how to walk inward, to trust that every season, every sorrow, every smile has its own time to exist, and then to pass. Just like you, listening to this story now, you too are in the middle of a cycle. Nothing lasts forever, and that, believe it or not, is a gift. If this story touched your heart the way it touched the king's, I invite you to carry it with you, not just as a memory, but as a reminder. On good days, take a deep breath and be grateful. On hard days, breathe deeply too. And remember, this too shall pass. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. It might be exactly what they need to keep going today. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, stories that don't just speak to the mind, but warm the heart. Leave a comment and tell us what this story meant to you. Your words might inspire someone else reading along. And if you'd like to help us share more light with the world, like the video, hit the notification bell, and stay with us for the next journey. Thank you for listening until the end. You are part of this story, and it's still being written.